They escaped the impossible, ordinary hands, daring hearts. In every era, catastrophe arrived without warning. Yet someone always noticed the first crack in fate. They learned to read fear like weather. One decision, made quickly, could rewrite the next decade. The untold history starts with small rooms and loud footsteps. Ordinary families hid plans in bread tins and lining seams. They didn't have legends, only practical maps of survival. When power vanished, they used light and sound as guides. They counted footsteps, measured shadows, and timed breaths. Escapes began with exits no one thought to watch. Workers slipped through service doors and under swinging gates. Teachers used chalk dust to leave warnings for strangers. Nurses memorized routes through hospitals that had become cages. They didn't flee for glory, they fled for breath. History hides these acts because survival looks ordinary. But the pattern repeats across continents and centuries. First they gathered essentials, then they severed old ties. A needle could stitch a new life into place. A coin could buy time, and time could buy safety. They left behind furniture, but not their skills. A blacksmith became a scavenger of parts and hope. A baker learned to share flour like medicine. A mechanic kept engines alive when systems collapsed. Escapes were never solo, they relied on networks. One hand held a rope, another held a promise. Strangers became witnesses who refused to look away. In riots and wars, kindness was an act of defiance. They used confusion as cover, moving with the crowd. If guards stared, they became invisible through routine. They wore the right expression, not the right uniform. Paperwork was burned, then recreated from memory. Sometimes they stole boats, not for riches, but for crossings. Sometimes they waited, because waiting is also motion. When the sea turned cruel, they trusted simple knots. They rationed water, then shared last sips without bargaining. Fear screams, but the body learns to whisper forward. After the first escape, the next threat always arrived. They started over with unfamiliar faces and new names. A new name didn't erase pain, but it opened doors. They used whatever language they had left in their mouths. Then they learned local rhythms by listening to work. Every rebuilt life began with a single safe bed. After that, they hunted meals like survival was a job. They traded stories for bread and bread for trust. When money was gone, skills became currency. People hired them because they never stopped learning. They rebuilt housing from scraps, nails, and borrowed hands. Boards became walls, and walls became protection. They planted gardens where maps said nothing would grow. A child watered plants like they were miracles on schedule. At night, they kept rituals that danger could not steal. They stitched calendars from scraps to remember time. The past haunted them, but they refused to live only there. To heal, they turned survival into service for others. They formed circles where secrets became safety. One by one, they wrote down what they learned to keep going. Because the future deserved a map drawn from truth. They discovered escape is only half the story. The other half is learning how to belong again. They carried scars, but they also carried laughter. They honored the dead by building what could outlast them. In storms, they used tarps and stubbornness as anchors. In fires, they learned which walls were breathing exits. In famine, they stretched meals until the body remembered strength. In dictatorships, they traded silence for coded messages. In displacements, they kept walking even when feet begged to stop. Each mile was a negotiation with despair. Then, the impossible became a road they could finally walk. Rebuilding didn't erase the rubble. It transformed it into foundations. They learned to start small, because small is survivable. Small jobs became stable days, and stable days became tomorrow. They gathered neighbors, not for pity, but for power and unity. One saved child could become the future's answer to fear. So they taught lessons that didn't fit in textbooks. They told the truth. No escape is guaranteed, but effort changes outcomes. When you feel stuck, remember the first step saved others. Start with one ally, one plan, and one promise to keep moving. From zero, ordinary people built entire futures, and you can too. Now carry their untold history into your next impossible day.